there's no shortage of examples of reasons why we may, as people in the United States, living in the United States, Americans, why we might feel disdain, shame about the behavior and actions and policies of our government, notwithstanding the scripted applause, as you were remarking on, Scott. But Netanyahu several times went after people in the United States protesting not only his speech, but of course his overall genocide. Here is one of those examples of what he had to say, tying it into, as always, his lust and thirst for a broader war with Iran.
For all we know, Iran is funding the anti-Israel protests that are going on right now outside this building. Not that many, but they're there, and throughout the city. Well, I have a message for these protesters. When the tyrants of Tehran, who hang gays from cranes and murder women for not covering their hair, are praising, promoting, and funding you, you have officially become Iran's useful idiots.
So, Scott, talk about Netanyahu's just attack. He was attacking people in the United States. He was attacking Americans for protesting his actions, calling them proxies of Iran.
He wasn't attacking people in America. He was attacking the United States of America, straight up, in the people's house. There's a reason why I'll never be elected a member of Congress. And one of the reasons is, had I been in that room, I would have stood up and walked to the stage and said, get him the hell out of here. You don't have a right, you foreign son of a bitch, to stand up in the people's house and criticize Americans for exercising their First Amendment rights of protest. You may not like what they're saying, but you better shut up in my country talking about my citizens doing this. I mean, what a... And then to have these people who took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, to have an enemy of America, because Netanyahu is an enemy of America, and he proved it, because he's intolerant of the things that make America, America, like the First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of association. All these things, those protesters are out there. You may not agree with them. I have to tell you, there are many times when protesters are in the streets in the United States, and I don't agree with them one bit. I am bitterly opposed to the cause that they are protesting in support of, or I may support the cause that they're protesting against. I will die to give them the right to protest. I will be the first one on the street to protect them, to let them do what they do, because that's what being an American's all about. That's why we had a revolution. That's why we had the Constitution. And for Benjamin Netanyahu to stand on that stage and attack Americans made my blood boil. That's the kind that, see, when they say defend the Constitution against all enemies, you rush the stage, you tackle that son of a bitch, and you break his neck, because you don't let him do that in the people's house. That's a frontal assault on American democracy. But the shameful part isn't just that he said it, but that we let him say it, and we applauded him saying that. Every single person who stood up and applauded, as Benjamin Netanyahu said, that should be targeted for removal from office. That is the real act of treason. That is the real betrayal of America. Again, you don't have to sit there and say, I support the protesters. You could actually agree with Benjamin Netanyahu that you don't support their cause. You could be a supporter of Israel and say these protesters are misguided. But to let him, a foreigner, stand in the people's house and condemn American citizens for doing what makes America great, that's unacceptable. It's disgusting. This is really one of the lowest moments in the history of the United States Congress, literally one of the lowest moments. We applauded a war criminal who was attacking American citizens for exercising their constitutional rights.
And Dan, you know, what Scott is saying here just reminds me, this isn't Netanyahu's first go around in Congress. Many times he's come to Congress, he's tried to do something to undermine U.S. policy, whether it was the Iran nuclear deal under Obama. He's even, I believe in 2020, he took dirty laundry to the United States and had White House staffers wash it. But I wanted you to just comment on this particular moment that Netanyahu is doing this. He's not only attacking the United States, he's attacking the protesters. We had protesters. There was thousands upon thousands of them descending. Many of them wanted to do a citizen's arrest of someone who is, he has a warrant out for his arrest from the ICC. And so anyone who believes in the International Criminal Court, international law, would be for that. But of course, there was huge police presence. No one, of course, got near Netanyahu. Could you just talk about this moment? Because as Scott said, this is an embarrassment in many ways, like one of the most embarrassing moments in U.S. history, when it comes to him being able to come here at this time when there might not be any time lower, not only for Israel's particular place in the world, but the United States as well.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, to state the obvious, we're in the midst of a presidential election campaign, right? All eyes are on this campaign. You had Donald Trump, who just survived an assassination attempt. The president of the United States, Joe Biden, has said he will not run again for election, which has rarely happened in U.S. history. The last person I remember doing that was Lyndon Baines Johnson in 1968. And amidst all this turmoil that we are suffering in this country, we invite this leader, so-called, who is committing genocide against another people, to speak, as Scott Ritter said, in the People's House in the United States Congress. It baffles me. It blows one's mind to think that at this time, certainly it would be bad at any time, but at this time in American history, the floor was ceded to someone like Benjamin Netanyahu to tell lies, to say that Israelis are protecting civilians when in fact they're targeting civilians and targeting civilian infrastructure, destroying mosques and churches and hospitals and universities, killing children, maiming children. There are more children who have lost limbs in this conflict than in any conflict ever in recorded history. I mean, even the folks who survive in Gaza will be left broken physically, mentally. Their society will be broken. And that, again, that is all according to plan. And you invite this person to address not just the U.S. Congress, but the nation. At this time, again, it's mind-boggling that this would happen. And it shows, honestly, the total corruption of our political system, of both parties. Both parties are complicit in this. Of course, this was, up until a couple days ago, Joe Biden's war, as much as it was Netanyahu's. And it is now, well, I guess it still is, but we'll see what happens to Joe Biden between now and November. But in any case, it has been Joe Biden's war, but of course supported by the Republicans. And I believe Netanyahu will be meeting with Trump in Florida at his house in Mar-a-Lago. So, the choice at the ballot box in November will be between, practically speaking, one supporter of genocide and another, though, of course, Jill Stein will be running, and who I'll probably vote for, by the way, but who probably does not stand a chance at winning. Even Bobby Kennedy, of course, is shown himself to be a dyed-in-the-wool Zionist. Unlike his uncle, by the way, John F. Kennedy, who actually tried to put some limits on Israel, who tried to make AIPAC follow the U.S. FARA law, the Foreign Agent Reporting Act, amongst other things, and to prevent Israel from getting nuclear weapons. Of course, we know what happened. He was killed. Kennedy. And there's very few presidents that have been willing to put any limits on Israel. Eisenhower did during the Suez crisis. I'm, of course, in Egypt, where the Suez Canal is. Um, and actually Reagan did during the assault of Israel upon Lebanon. But those are very, few and far between instances of the U.S. putting any brakes on Israel's attack of the Palestinians or other peoples. But again, the timing could not be worse, but actually it could not be more emblematic of the U.S.'s relationship with Israel. A relationship in which sometimes it's hard to know what is the dog and what is the tail, right? And who is wagging who. So at least to that extent, the American people see that dynamic happening and how much power Israel has over our political system, which should be very offensive and upsetting to all Americans.
Yeah. I mean, the hypocrisy of it all. You have people like Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi. They didn't show up for the speech, but throughout this entire period, I mean, we're entering month 9 of a genocide. We're coming toward a year. They've been championing Israel's right to defend itself this entire period. They have been receiving, and they have received hundreds of thousands, if not millions, from AIPAC. I mean, the hypocrisy is just so clear. And Scott, you can jump in here and just any closing thoughts about this moment with regard to Netanyahu's visits. I mean, his meetings with the presidents. We also had Biden at the same day he decided to give his I dropped out of the race 5-minute speech. It's a very odd day. This would be July 24th in American political and geopolitical history. So, Scott, any final thoughts on this question?
Look, oftentimes when we talk about, for instance, things like what Netanyahu is trying to accomplish, the political infighting in Israel, even the absolute tragedy of Gaza. I've said this before. I've stopped crying about the people of Gaza, not because I don't care. It's just how can you just overwhelmed with the death? I mean, it's just every day it's the same, the butchery, the slaughter, etc. And it wears you down to the point that you become numb, because that's part of a survival instinct. Otherwise you just collapse and you can't function if you actually. And it's a tragedy that's come to that, because every single death in Gaza deserves to be mourned, deserves tears, deserves people, ripping their hair out. But we're not there. But then I take a step back, and I am warmed, and that's the right word, by the recognition that Israel is fatally wounded, that it is over for Israel, that Netanyahu can humiliate America by coming and speaking before the Congress, but this will be a footnote in history, because soon all we'll be talking about when it comes to the Zionist entity known as Israel, this apartheid state, this genocide embracing, disaster of a nation, is how it disappeared, because it will disappear. I'm not promoting the violent destruction of Israel. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying that Israel, the greater Israel that exists today, this Zionist experiment, is incapable of continuing, because it is predicated on things that aren't going to happen. The Abrams Accord was designed to breathe life into greater Israel by killing the possibility of a Palestinian state. It literally killed the possibility of it. And it opened the door, because it got the collusion of Arab neighbors of Israel to agree that that the Palestinian state would die, that it wasn't going to happen, that instead they were going to get this greater prosperity, situation where, people recognize Israel, open up diplomatic relations with Israel, begin economic interaction with Israel, and Israel becomes the economic hub of, a regional economic transformation. That was the goal. That was the objective. That's not going to happen. There will be no. Remember, a couple of years ago, Joe Biden stood in India and said, "We're going to have the India-Middle East Economic Corridor, and this is going to be the." Benjamin Netanyahu spoke at the General Assembly. Instead of putting up a cartoon of an Iranian bomb, as he normally does, he put up a map bragging about how this was going to save Israel. This was the future of Israel. No, it's not. Never going to happen. Israel is fatally wounded. The Israeli experiment, the Zionist experiment, has been shown to be a fraud. Israel will never again live in peace. Never again live in peace. The axis of resistance will always be there with the potential to rain death and destruction down on Israel. Israel is going to be compelled to accept the reality of a two-state solution, knowing that a two-state solution is the end of Israel, because to achieve a two-state solution, Israel will be called upon to terminate the West Bank thievery that's taking place, the murder and theft. They will have to dismantle. He said, and that's the end of Israel right there, because now all the Brooklyn Jews that went over there to steal Palestinian homes will be thrown out physically and leave. There'll be a near civil war in Israel over this, worse than what happened in Gaza in I think 2005 when they dismantled the Gazan settlements. This will be 10 times worse. And what you'll see is that the people will start fleeing Israel. We've already seen 500,000 Israelis leave. You're going to see millions of Israelis leave. And in a nation that counts 9-10 million people, you lose 3 to 4 million people, you're done, you're finished. And that's the future of Israel. And that's what warms my heart, knowing that the axis of resistance, knowing that Hamas, knowing that the sacrifice of the Palestinian people has led to the condition that Israel has inflicted. It's a self-inflicted fatality. Israel did it to itself. Israel is the one that lost the faith of the world by committing genocide. Israel is the one that prompted criminal indictments from the International Criminal Court. Israel's the one that got the International Court of Justice to recognize its apartheid state status. All of this is done by Israel. So I'm thankful to Israel for doing this. I'm glad Hamas initiated what it did on October 7th, because it allowed Israel to be Israel, Israel to show the world the reality of this sick, murderous, genocidal regime, and for Israel to shoot itself fatally. I don't know how long it's going to take for the death of Israel to occur, but I know this: Israel is finished. It's over for Israel. And when the two-state solution is put out there and the Israeli aspect of it collapses, as it will collapse, then it's a one-state solution, Palestine, hopefully a Palestine where Muslims live together in peace and harmony with Christians and Jews. Remember, there's a difference between Zionists and Jews. Jews should not be prosecuted. Jews should have every right to live in Palestine as members of that broader monolithic community, but people who worship the same God, but not Zionist. The Zionist entity is dead, and that's what warms my heart, and that's what makes all the death and suffering that's taken place have meaning. It's given purpose to the martyrdom of so many. And that's what I live for. I literally hope that before I die, I have the absolute privilege of watching the Zionist entity be wiped off the map of modern civilization and replaced by a singular state known as Palestine.
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyDhaiphong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.